Welcome to the Roy Morgan Weekly Update. In the week before the Reserve Bank increased interest rates another 25 basis points, consumer confidence and government confidence both increased. However, support for the government was down 1% to 52%, ahead of the coalition on 48% on a two-party preferred basis. Now, although support for the government was down 1%, it was essentially back in line with last year's federal election result, just 18 months ago. Roy Morgan government confidence bounced back, up 9 points to 81, although this is still well below the neutral level of 100. Still, a majority of Australians, 51%, say the country's going in the wrong direction. Only 32% say the country's heading in the right direction. Now, consumer confidence. ANZ, Roy Morgan Consumer Confidence, increased 2.8 points to 77.8 before the Reserve Bank met. The increase was driven by an increase in number of people saying now's a good time to buy, up 4% to 22%. And the increase comes as shoppers gear up for the biggest retail period of the year, the Christmas shopping period. The Australian Retail Association Roy Morgan forecast shows Australian shoppers expected to spend $78 billion in the lead up to Christmas this year, and that's virtually unchanged on a year ago. A look at consumer confidence by housing status shows no improvement this week for people paying off their home, in fact a small decline. There were increases though for both home owners and renters this week that drove the overall increase. Now, concern about inflation is clearly a pressing issue with the Reserve Bank raising interest rates this week, and the weekly indicator before the Reserve Bank's increase showed inflation expectations were up 0.3 percentage points to 5.5%. So Australians were expecting annual inflation to be 5.5% over the next 2 years. Petrol prices have now spent a record 13 straight weeks above $1.90 a litre, and we're at an average retail price of $1.99 per litre this last week. Next, Roy Morgan's latest estimates show real unemployment in Australia decreased in October, down 0.3% to 9.9%. Now, the drop's not surprising given the large amount of hiring for last month's referendum on The Voice that was held in mid-October. But despite the slight decrease in unemployment, there was a substantial increase in underemployment, the part-time and casual employees who were looking for more work. Underemployment increased 1.5 points to 10.2% in October. So these overall figures show total unemployment and underemployment, what we might call workforce underutilisation, was at 20.1% of the workforce in September, over 3.1 million people, and the highest overall figure for 3 years since October 2020. As we've said for several months, the monthly movements are within a broader context of a surging population and workforce. The fact is that Australia's had an unprecedented surge in population over the last year. Our population aged 14 plus, which is largely the working age population, has increased by a record 785,000 people compared to a year ago. And that's now brings our population to 22.1 million. This surge in population's driven increases in both employment and unemployment, the Australian workforce, and that increased by 671,000 to over 15.5 million. Now, almost 14 million Australians, 13,959,000 in fact, Australians are employed. That's 491,000 more than a year ago. 437,000 are in full-time employment, or 437,000 more in full-time employment, and 54,000 more in part-time employment. So most of the increase has gone to full-time employment. Unfortunately, there's also been a substantial increase in the number of unemployed. That's up 180,000 to over 1.5 million. Clearly, the growth in population and the workforce is outstripping the economy's ability to provide jobs to all these new entrants, and the number of unemployed Australians has grown significantly. As the economy remains weak and in a per capita recession, according to some economists, it's likely there will continue to be pressure on the economy, providing enough jobs for all those in the increasing population and workforce that are looking for one. The Reserve Bank's decision to increase interest rates again this week puts further pressure on businesses going forward and is likely to lead to less hiring in the months ahead. So the massive figure of 3.1 million Australians unemployed or underemployed, that's over 20% of the workforce, is the most important problem facing the federal government. And that's a wrap for this week. Thanks for listening today, and I look forward to bringing you the reaction to the Reserve Bank's decision to increase interest rates and the latest data on consumer confidence, inflation expectations, voting intention, and business confidence next week. Subscribe free to our Roy Morgan YouTube channel for all the latest political, economic, and market research data and insights.